Stanford.
Here we go. I'm Marka Carson. I'm class of 1985. Welcome to everyone. It's so great to see all of you through the screen, however it can be done right now. I am personally so delighted to introduce Professor Emeritus Barry Sanders, who's going to talk with us about our beloved Grove House. Beloved Grove House. I actually realized in thinking about today, if you look on my Pitzer transcript, you will not see a Professor Barry Sanders class. I believe I never had a formal class with Barry, but I spent literally hundreds of hours with him and collaborating with him at Grove House committee meetings and on the porch of the Grove House and the back room of the Grove House and what is now the outdoor classroom adjacent to the Grove House. Barry taught at Pitzer from 1972 to 2005, and I did the math, that's 33 years. That's pretty impressive. I'm a teacher myself. His focus was around the history of creative ideas. In talking with him recently, he referred to Professor Ron Rubin as being a very influential colleague and dear friend. He has written many books. I looked it up. What I saw said 14. So I don't know, Barry, 14, 15, 16, 17. We've all had a lot of time on our hands lately. Some of his book collaborations have included with Professor Paul Shepard, Professor Michael Woodcock, and Ivan Illich, who I had the pleasure of meeting and collaborating with when he was a visiting professor with Barbara Duden during my era.
Fantastic. Wow.
After leaving Pitzer, Barry co-founded and chaired the Masters in Critical Theory and Creative Research program at Pacific Arts College, Northwest College of Art. He is currently at the Oregon Institute for Creative Research, shortened to be OICR in Portland. And he co-founded and co-directs that along with Anne-Marie Oliver. And in finding out a little bit more about them, I learned that the Institute focuses on the intersection of ethics, aesthetics, ecology, and education, which is so Pitzer. So please welcome Barry as together we go to the Grove House.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you. Thank you. So Rick Shapiro had to go, but there you are. You're on this side. There are so many. I mean, it's a 5-year struggle to move that house and to put it down in its rightful place. So details abound, and I forget lots of things, and Rick remembers much more than I. But what I did was write something out talk generally about my sense of the college and my sense of moving that house, and then we can have it's only takes maybe 10 minutes to read or 15 minutes, and then we can have a discussion. How's that? Is that okay? It should be okay since I worked hard on this. Paul, help me here. Is that all right? Okay. So, and what it tries to do is, I mean, so many people that when I counted up the number of people in Scott Hall with whom I taught, or colleagues, the number of people who have passed away is astounding. I get up to, like, you know, everyone you mentioned. Ivan Illich has passed away. Paul Shepard has passed away. Ron Rubin has passed away. I mean, so many. Michael Woodcock, with whom I did a book, is gone. And then I thought about, I was looking at some of the pictures on the website about the Cahutek Festival, and there was a young man named Tag Gibbs. I don't know, Paul, do you remember him? His parents had an accounting firm. Steve, do you remember him, Tag Gibbs?
What's his first name, Barry?
His name was Theodore Arthur Gibbs III, but his nickname was Tag, T-A-G.
No.
And he was he was an amazing, with Peter Wurmser, they were mimes for the first Cahutek Festival. He's passed away. And I think to whoever, maybe Brooke or to someone who's here, it'd be nice to be more informed about about students that one has had that's gone. Well, my God, there's Josh Passman. Hi, Josh. Holy mackerel. Okay, here I go, okay?
Hey, Barry, looking good.
In the neighborhood. All right, here we go. To move the house, halt in some small way to what goes by the name of progress in this country. Developers love to raise the old and put in its place, sometimes in the matter of only a few months, the brand new and the cutting edge, the latest in design and barely affordable luxury. To move an old building The Grove House for me was a moving act in the most profound ways, for it made very real a whole series of the most moving friendships in the college. The president himself, Bob Atwell, dean of faculty Al Schwartz, numerous faculty members, and scores of Pitzer students. Don't use the word friend in any loose or frivolous way. I consider Atwell a friend, and Al Schwartz has been an absolute dear friend. I just talked to him yesterday on the phone for now over 50 years. The far-fetched plot to slice a perfectly fine house into 3 parts, to transport it across town, part of the journey on Santa Fe Railroad's own tracks, and to set it down on campus was only possible, I truly believe, at a place like Pitzer College, where there was very little hierarchy, very few bureaucratic entanglements, no so-called hidden agendas, and most critically, a whole cadre of students who were eager to take hold of the wildest idea and make it a reality. The move also came during the heyday of education in this country. When I think back at Pitzer and think back about teaching, I really do think it was an absolute different time, obviously, for education, when every idea and declaration did not need to be passed through the sieve of some technologically driven program, where the goals of efficiency and speed were not predictors of success, where students didn't need the approval of an advisor or demand course credit for every idea they entertained. Process and not program, method and not predictability were what mattered. It was a time, the dark ages of our enlightenment, when the word algorithm might be mistaken at Pitzer for a new dance move. Pitzer came to life in the early 60s as an experiment, and in a few short years had the only cadre of students in the consortium bold enough, today we would say woke enough, to march against the war in Vietnam, wending their way through the 5 campuses and into town. I mean, if there were traffic in town, they would have stopped the traffic. Pitzer had no majors when I came, no departments, not much administration to speak of, not even a centralized quad, no concentration of a Hyde Park. Instead, and I talked to Ted Criley, the architect, about this, and this was very deliberate, we were given its opposite, dispersion, reinforced by a landscape feature called the mounds. So if you wanted to, we had no Sproul Hall, right? We had no steps leading up to Sproul Hall. We had no gathering place to start a revolution, and Ted Criley particularly wanted that to be. So we had no, the Grove House has to be seen in such a context, as a focus and a home base. For students who could not go home at Thanksgiving, Rachel, an early chef, made dinner for the stranded and the homesick. Besides the curious personality of both the college and the campus, I had a very specific preparation for the house move, one that taught me a key lesson, which is that at Pitzer, a person could pull off nearly anything, from living on campus in a yurt, Paul, you remember this, to spending a semester in Nepal in a house, from working with James Turrell on the Rodin Crater Project, to spending time at the CIA, which is Pitzer, the Culinary Institute of America. In the spring of 1974, with Jim Bogan, a professor of philosophy, the two of us got the idea to honor a rebellious comet named Kohoutek, with a comet that never showed up, with an elaborate festival. One of the things we did was to commandeer the clock tower. Paul, what was the name of the maintenance guy that loves him? I can't remember his name, but he gave us the keys to the clock tower, and we took out the tape for the carillon, and we replaced it with a tape that said, Kohoutek is coming. It began on Friday afternoon with a parade through the village by the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, led by Danny Elfman, who would later write the film score for Batman, Beetlejuice, and Edward Scissorhands. We also invited a friend of Jim Bogan's, the Pickle Family Circus from San Francisco, to juggle, tumble, and terrify, swallowing swords, eating fire, and somersaulting into sheer silliness. A tightrope was stretched across McConnell Center. We had near continuous poetry readings, rock concerts, and movies that played all through the night and landed the night both inside and outside the Commons. One student, I can't remember his name, I want desperately to remember this person's name. One student jumped out of a light plane and landed by parachute in the middle of the mounds. Every building was draped in tie-dye. The festival did not end until Sunday morning. When I approached President Atwell and Dean Schwartz with the idea for a festival honoring the invisible, they simply said, save the bills and give them to us and go for it. Without Cahootec, I don't know if the college would have gone so easily for a house move. Kind of softened it up, I think. It was 1974, and the college was still being carried aloft by the gale winds of the 60s, by demonstrations against the Vietnam War, by liberation movements of all kinds, and a wonder about what would or could possibly arrive next. It did, as some of you might remember, in the form of Nixon resigning and then getting pardoned. The following year, in the fall of 1975, I decided to teach a class, English 151, that I called the Arts and Crafts Movement in America, a movement with its roots deep in England, which came to prominence in the middle of the 19th century, dedicated to creating beautiful objects solely by hand, and which lasted until the late teens in this country. It aimed to raise all objects that were made by hand, that is the idea of craft, to the level of fine art. The movement looked back to Karl Marx for its manifesto on the liberated worker, by the way, happy May Day, and ahead to William Morris for its testament on the purity of taste. The medieval guild provided the model for the solidarity of the artists collective, an early version of the labor union. The arts and crafts movement demanded natural materials and an aesthetic of unadorned simplicity. It demanded real food grown without poisons on small plots of land. It made the decisive point that we human beings come alive with our hands. One of the most powerful political philosophers for me, Hannah Arendt, describes us not just as Homo sapiens sapiens, but as Homo faber, creatures who fabricate, who make the beauty of creation evident with our own two hands, but who, is important for me, with those same two hands, have the ability, as is more and more evident, to destroy all of nature. A recent and tragic example took place last August in Joshua Tree, where a fierce blaze started by campers in the Chima Dome area of the Eastern Mojave burned over 43,000 acres and over 1 million Joshua trees. Local scientists have labeled it an extinction event, which means simply and tragically that very old forest of Joshua trees, the area having evolved over thousands of years, all 1.3 million of those trees can never grow back. The arts and crafts movement, with its flaws and decrepit philosophical stances, set out to save the natural world from the ravages of human mangling and manipulation by elevating hands once again to the level of the sacrosanct. Paul Falstich was in that class and produced during the semester a guide. Do you have a copy of this? To Claremont's Many Varieties of Trees. You do have a copy?
No, I did a guide to Claremont architecture.
Architecture.
Not trees. Yeah. And
Do you have?
I don't think I have a copy, but the library has a copy in the special collection.
I'd love to see it. I would really love to see it. What was the guide that Tom Lowry did?
Don't
He did
remember.
something else, but I can't remember. When the semester neared its end, students fell back on the power of the medieval guild to argue for a group project, to pull off something significant in promoting community on campus, and mentioned Cahootec as an example. One group suggested building a student center from scratch. That's a Pitzer shtick, right? There was no central place to gather. Others suggested finding an old house and moving on campus, which seemed outlandish enough to be both feasible and fun. And so it was that in the spring of 1976, the year of the bicentennial, which became, as you remember, a time of restoring, recycling, and retrofitting, a year to focus on the significance of history, the small, unassuming class set out with Kathy Curtis, Rick Shapiro, Tom Lowry, Paul Falstich, far beyond the end of the semester to find a house and drag it, perhaps against its will, onto campus. So this morning I was talking to Rick Shapiro on the phone, and he was mentioning a town hall meeting about where this idea actually originally came up. So Rick, would you say something about it? Please? Can't hear you. Rick,
Rick, you're on mute.
how do we tell him he's on mute? Can't hear you.
Can an administrator unmute Rick by chance?
Oh wait, he's aware that he's not aware. He's disappeared, and wow. It'd be nice to be in a room with real people, you know?
I can only mute him. I can only mute him. I cannot unmute him.
But he's gonna fix it maybe.
Barry, can I say something?
You absolutely, I mean, you're the, yeah. Where are you?
I'm right here. This is Kim Hudson.
Kim,
I just
yes.
wanted, hi, I just
Hi.
wanted to say that I loved the Grove House and I spent countless hours there because it was one of the accessible places on campus at Pitzer and the 5 colleges that I could actually get into because they had a ramp in the back for the food to come in. So it was really naturally accessible at a time when a lot of the Claremont colleges were not.
Yeah.
So
it really was not just for the food, because it was for wheelchair access, and also we for ADA reasons, and also we had to make the bathroom large enough that a wheelchair could turn around in, so it had that accessibility as well.
yeah, it was the only place that I could go to until my senior year. Was one of the only places I could go to the bathroom on campus.
That's, well, Rick, you back?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So quickly, my freshman year, the Board of Trustees and Administration approached the student body and called a town hall meeting, which back in the day was a gathering of the whole community. And they were concerned about the quality of life. There was a high attrition rate at the college, and they wanted ideas from the community on how to keep students at the college. And as a freshman, I was not sure I really believed they cared, but over the course of the meeting, they really opened it up to any ideas. And at one point I suggested that they let students take sledgehammers to dorm rooms and other things and rebuild things, because if they build things, they'll be more committed to the school. That didn't go over. I became the sledgehammer guy, but I talked about a student store, which we didn't have, and a student center, which we didn't have. And they then invited me to write up proposals for both. So I wrote up a proposal for a student store, which unfortunately I ended up running and operating for 2 years. I ended up owning it legally because the college didn't want to. But they took the idea of a student center seriously. And that was just sort of that beginning scope of, hey, we should do something. And that was my only early contribution, really. But Barry's class magnificently took this on as a possibility. And obviously the rest is history. But it was a testament that back in those days, the administration, and I give Bob Atwell a lot of credit, really wanted to hear ideas and were not afraid to empower people to act on them. And so that's being an early activist in my life. It was amazing to actually see things happen. The later story of them fighting against us and us having to fight so hard to complete it is the flip side to that. But again, getting it done is still a testimony of what can be, what can be done if people are determined and smart and work together.
Thank you, Rick. Fantastic. So at about the same time, the campus seemed to be going through, and this was very important for me, going through a realignment of identity and interests. John Rodman, also passed away, was drifting out of his own discipline, political philosophy, and into botany and biology. I was slowly moving out of the English field group and into the history of ideas. Ron Rubin was leaving philosophy and making plans to open a karate studio. Carl Hotel was taking students to sacred sites in Santa Fe, where they lived communally for months. It was indeed a time of shifting interests and changing values, and Pitzer did not just permit such intellectual roaming. The college encouraged radical rearrangements and sudden changes in perspectives. After all, there were no departments, only interest groups. That's what was there when I first came, that over the years morphed into field groups. Carl wanted his students to make their own pigments out of native plants from scratch by hand. John wanted to dig into the earth with his own two hands. Ron Rubin wanted to grapple with his hands. I wanted to restore furniture with my hands. The Grove House served handmade food. David Furman made ceramic mugs for the house that were all hand thrown. It was the 70s and everyone was handsome. If you look at the Oxford English Dictionary, for the entry that had the longest entry for any body part, I don't mean to be risque here, though it is Pitzer, it is hand. Hand goes on for 23 pages. We're handsome, we're called handsome in the Middle Ages, both men and women, because we can show God's presence, God's beauty with our hands by making things. We put our hands up and said no to the Vietnam War, no to bigotry, no to everything that oppressed and demeaned. We were on the move. We put up our hands, not in surrender, but in an exclamation of surprise and wonder. And that's what I loved about the Zetterberg House, soon to become the Grove House. That's made in great part by hand, from the cedar shingles on the roof, stonework to the foundation, to the clapboard siding and the oak furniture line, all without the help of social media, Instagram, or without a single tweet, except maybe from a few songbirds. There is little hand-rendered architecture left these days. I know because I recently tried to buy something called architectural butterboard. Architects used to make their models by hand out of that butterboard. Models which now get rendered by a program called CAD, computer-aided design, the equivalent of CGI in films or CAS in operating rooms. In 1975, the world had obviously not yet veered into the virtual. The Apple I appeared in 1976, and we took advantage of the touch and the feel, the look in the eye of each other. We spoke face to face, we met, we yelled, and we raised our voices. We argued, and we took people aside and we cajoled and consoled. We hugged and mugged and sometimes pleaded. And above all, we learned to handle resistance, and we succeeded. One of the books that Carl Hertel gave me when I first came to the college was a book by Gaston Bachelard. Bachelard did books about all four of medieval elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And one of the things that he talks about that's very about being in the real world is resistance, that things have resistance. You dig in the earth, you try to push a stone, that they push back. And I think that was really important. And maybe Rick would attest to this also, that resistance was very important to have to the success of this. And so that was Pitzer College in 1975. That was the preface to how an old house built in 1902 at 721 Harrison Avenue happened to be sold to the students of Pitzer College by the board members of Pilgrim White Elephant off their property to make way for a new and modern hospital. And that's how the house, in short, came to be a reality. And that's how a band of upstarts managed to sell the idea to the faculty. There's only one dissenting vote. Do you remember that, Paul? There was only one person who voted against it. That was Alan Greenberger, who also has passed away, but who voted against it because he wanted a swimming pool. Sold it to the president, the board, all of whom approved the project, so long as it did not cost the college students an untutored but emboldened Zetterberg House Committee set out to raise, this is amazing, $100,000 to move the house in 3 pieces, 2.5 miles across town. When I looked up to see what the equivalent would be today, it's about $490,000. And so it was, some 2 years and 200 meetings later, on July 16th, 1977, at 1:05 in the morning, the incredible moving house made its way across town. And this was especially crucial because we couldn't move down Foothill Boulevard because there's a federal regulation that says you can't move, who the hell wrote this? You can't move houses on federal highways, and Foothill Boulevard is Route 66. So we had to move it through town. Every time you raise an electric line, you have to pay $1,000 to electric company to keep people's phones going. So I got this idea, and with the movers, Thomas Brothers Movers, that couldn't we move it down, part of it at least, down the railroad tracks? And we got permission somehow, some weird way to do that, so long as we did it between 1 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock. And if the house were on the tracks when the train was coming, you have to listen to the whistle. So that's how it made its way across town. That's how it came to squat down, where it now seems so organic and so natural, with the porch and its rockers facing the settings. And until the remodeled administration building grew fatter and fatter, and against many protestations, blocked a great and comforting view. All that pales, all the endless details, and the months upon months of turning into years and years of victory, back into disappointment, back once more to victory, of trying to stave off officials, the fire department, the architectural review board, the board of
Barry, come back, unfreeze.
Barry, your
on,
audio is cutting off. You might turn off your video. If you're running out of bandwidth, turn off the video so your audio doesn't cut out.
Grove House freeze tag. Hopefully we'll see him in a couple minutes.
Well, after the house was
Yes.
moved, everybody rested.
Well, yeah, until Barry comes back, I mean, if it's okay, I'd jump in for a second, if that's okay with everybody. So when the house first got moved, it was set not where it sits now. It was set closer to the clock tower. And I was actually gone from school for a year. And when I came back in the fall of my senior year, I got a call from Barry saying, the board is meeting today to vote to demolish the house. And I was sort of shocked to hear that. There it was sitting. And in fact, when I went to the board meeting, one of the board members had decided it was too close to the clock tower, and that would dishonor the memory of the Ward family that donated the money to the clock tower. And there was no money to move it. So they were going to vote to just demolish it and move on. And I came to the meeting and basically said I wasn't going to let that happen. And I offered to write a check if they would match it out of my pocket, if each board member, that would cover the cost of moving it again. And they sort of laughed and dismissed me. And that started the movement to save the Zetterberg house, which went on my whole senior year. And for those of you who were there, it is a different kind of story because the board was determined to destroy it. And Barry and I and Ron and a whole bunch of students and some administrators decided that wasn't going to happen. And so we kind of fought tooth and nail, and we demanded environmental impact statements. We got the Los Angeles Times to come out and cover the story. And it got to the point where the board did not want to hear from us. So they moved the board meeting from campus to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles. And so I chartered a bus and brought about 100 students and administrators into LA to the meeting, which surprised them. And, you know, the fact is, we got to the point where they could not legally demolish it. They couldn't get a permit. We didn't have the money, though, to get it moved. And we were sort of at a standstill. And it was a really dark, difficult time because they thought they were in the right. We were sure we were in the right. And the
Hi,
community was
Barry,
incredibly,
comma.
is very bad. Anyway, a miracle did happen at the end, because we were kind of at that standstill, and they decided if we could come up with the money to move it, they'd finish the project. And Sheila Kemper's family stepped in and donated the money to make the final move. And it was actually the morning of my graduation that I went to the board meeting where they voted to accept the donation and move the building to where it now stands and complete the project. And so it was quite, you know, I'm so proud of what everybody did, both to start the project, finish the project, and it's just an extraordinary place that I feel unbelievably tied to, and I feel so honored to be a small part of that. But I really honor the hundreds of people, the Kemper family, everyone who I'm sorry, as you note, it was the Kemper family, Sheila Kemper's family, who was a student and very involved in the project. And it is an extraordinary thing that I think very, very few schools would have, I'm not sure how many schools this could have happened at, because it was not the 60s, it was the 70s, and to get that kind of activism and have a lot of administrative support. And again, Bob Atwell was kind of amazing, not trying to shut us down, and the board standing in opposition, but ultimately accepting the will of the community. I have since learned of the great activism history, and I really honor Paul Falstich and people like that from back in those days who worked there and have kept that sense of activism alive at Pitzer. So it's become really an extraordinary legacy, and I'm so proud of what everybody's achieved there. So I would ramble on, but this is really Barry's gig. So,
But Barry's not back yet.
okay.
When I
Well,
left
again,
a few
and like
minutes ago, go ahead.
No, if there's any question, I mean, again, this might be a time to chat with one another till Barry gets back.
When I left
Barry
a
raise
few
a
minutes
question.
ago, I was looking on my
There
bookshelves
he is.
for, oh, is he back?
He's coming in.
Okay, there was a commemorative event at the Grove House to celebrate its 100th year anniversary. And I do have that 8.5 by 11 spiral bound book, but apparently it's in a box from my recent move. It's not on my bookcases where it should be. So that's what I was going to look for. Just, you know, that I was able to attend that event and it was really lovely. And there were members of the Zetterberg family there and a lot of alumni and staff and students who had had history with the house over time. Hi, Barry, welcome back.
Is he there?
Barry's on mute.
Okay.
How
Well,
about
I'll
now?
throw in unmute that in the spirit of handmade, as we were trying to organize to dissuade the destruction, Ron Rubin had acquired this really beautiful ancient printing press. So when it came to printing flyers to get people involved and to get on the bus and all that, it was all printed on this hand set type typesetter that Ron Rubin had in his garage. And it was really an extraordinary thing to go over there and watch him typesetting painstakingly to create these beautiful posters that we put up around town and around the campus to get people engaged. So that, as part of that whole handmade legacy, this really was an organic, handmade house and project and community and collaboration.
No, that's how I I'll finish this and then we can talk some more. Is that cool? All of that, yeah, all of that. Can you hear me now? No? Yeah, all of that pales, all the endless details and the months upon months, turning into years and years of victory, back into disappointment and back once more to victory. Trying to stave off city officials, trying to raise all that, all of that tribulation pales when I remember a moment when a student on the committee to save the Zetterberg house, a shoeless and fearless young man named Rick Shapiro, in a room filled with 36 Natalie attired, well-heeled members of the Pitzer Board of Trustees, stood up and announced, I'm prepared to write a check for $1,500 of my own money to save the house. I challenge every board member here to match my pledge. Let's save the house. A protracted, painful, Long silence followed. Not a single person took up the challenge. On December 5th, 1978, the board voted to put the project, which seemed to be slowly moldering, remember, I at least had it covered with canvas, out of its misery and said no more. The project was over. But to our true surprise, and one of the things that allowed it not to be over was the fact that we had registered this house on the National Register of Historic Places. The house actually got the first Architectural Excellence Award in Claremont, but that we argued that the school did not take into account its historic significance in order to demolish it, and they had to do another EIR report, which gave us some time. One other member of the committee, Sheila Kemper, told her parents about the plight of the house, and at the 11th hour, after we put up a fight arguing that since the house was on the register, demolition would require an elaborate EIR report, the Kempers pledged enough monies, not just to finish the project, this is out of Kemper Insurance and another foundation, but to purchase furniture and kitchen equipment. Surprise and miracle marked the project all along the way. We were saved. All the anguish and struggle, along with all the scores of meetings and disappointments, vanished completely. Because one tell a young Ben Harper, the son of the Dean of Students, guitar because I wanted Taj Mahal to hear him play. And suddenly there he was, touring with Taj in Hawaii. And I could say to John Darnell, go fetch your guitar and play at open mic. And there he was touring with his own ragtag group. So it was once again, one night in the house, when Matt Nathanson agreed to play a single song. And there he is, after 18 solo albums, showing no signs of slowing down. There was that most playful spirit named Jonah Machunga and his most joyful singing, recasting himself as Far, in response perhaps to Ken Kesey's bus named Farther. And there was Steve Dignan interviewing Allen Ginsberg one evening, who at the time was staying in the guest room of the Grove House, in which truncated interview Steve sent to the New Yorker with the title, The Kiss That Did Not Happen. It is an idea, a singular one at that, this place called Pitzer College, an adventure that I loved and that I love. There was something very different about this place, and I noticed it the first day, about the classes it offered and the students it attracted, about its relaxed style of teaching and ways of knowing, its defiance of how other more traditional colleges, so-called, played their game of admissions, organized their curriculum, and conducted their meetings. I knew it was the right place when at conferences, in response to my name tag that read Pitzer College, people would sometimes ask in disbelief, I've never heard of that. Do you mean Pfizer? Pitzer is a place where I relearned, and especially in moving the Zetterberg House on the campus, that people are mightily more important than rules or categories or what is normal and expected. The question for me is not how did that house move happen at Pitzer back then, but rather how could it happen on any campus anywhere today? For delight in the everyday at the moment seems to be suffocating inside an airtight set of rules and regulations, wrapped up to look attractive in bright red of who is the top gun and what is the bottom line. We wonder who is surveilling us now and how, who's listening so clearly without ears. Where are the cameras? Let us hope Zoom does not survive beyond the plague. People could make fun of hippy dippy Pitzer, that 60s inspired upstart in the Groves, but we sure had our own style of good times mixed with great learning. There was always the groove at the Grove, music on the mounds, and pong in the pit. It is a spirit of play and persistence, a memory of Pitzies playing ultimate, of deadheads on the road, and fully alive minds in the classroom that I most cherish about my 35 years or so at Pitzer College. I cherish it still. Oh, right. In February 1989, 42 years ago, President Frank Ellsworth officially dedicated the Grove House. Thank you. Woo, 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 woo. Thank you, guys. Oh my God, it's so amazing. Amanda's son, Susan Warmbrun, Sandy Corbett, Brooke Butler. Applause going up. Rick, it's
We're
so-
not done, but I just want to thank Barry so much for being available and willing to do this today. It's
What else would I
think
be doing?
extra
Saturday morning.
meaningful, especially this year. I just think it's just like the perfect year to be talking about what I consider to be the physical heart of campus.
People should talk about Stuart Pixley, 1990. Wow. Hi, Stuart. John.
Barry,
Yeah.
I have a really question for you. It's Josh Passman, 2004. And thank you for all that you did for me for my time at Pitzer. One of the things that it seems like Pitzer, that the Grove House in particular was really ahead of the curve in terms of the pandemic with the outdoor classroom, which I had really fond memories of going to and having classes outside. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about and happened?
Yeah, it was lots of, let's see, the only way that I knew about the plague and so-called pandemic was from Boccaccio and Chaucer, right, about reading about it. So it was not prompted by that, but it was prompted by, there was a refrain at Pitzer over the years, could we just go outside and go on the mounds? And you know, and I always had a hard time with it because I am enough of a ham that I needed concentration, you know, and people sitting and looking and paying attention. And so the idea came for the notion of an outdoor, someone funded, I don't remember who, maybe Josh, maybe you remember, but the idea was to, I always ask this question about the college or places I know. If you were going to tell someone that you love them, where would you do it on Pitzer's campus? And where was the most, what's the most intimate place for you? Special kind of sacred place, protected place on campus where you would say to somebody, you have amazing eyes. Mm-hmm. And people had a hard time doing that. So and the answer that usually came, I don't know if it's still there. There was a swing set behind one of the dormitories near the parking lot. Is it? Anyway, wanted to have some kind of intimate space like that with that was outside, and I wanted a swing, outdoor swing that two people could sit on, a kind of love swing. Mm-hmm. And so that was its basic impulse, was about love. What the hell else is there, right? except for tofu.
And chocolate chip cookies, Jill.
And a chocolate chip cookie that never has enough chocolate. I know, Marka, I know. Yeah, so that's, what do you do now, Josh?
I'm lawyering in Los Angeles, doing estate planning. Have my own practice, and more importantly, I had my daughter on earlier. She's almost 15 months now.
Oh my God! Congratulations!
Thank you.
Tell them what book your father wrote.
Oh, he's a music business, so he's all you need to know about the music business. So he's a music attorney. All the
How many gold records did he get? He's
got a room with the records.
I remember that room.
Yeah.
Went to Josh's mother, who called me more than my own mother. I went there for Passover, and it was this room filled with gold records.
Yeah, but don't forget about the food. That was the best part.
The food was great. Yeah, the food. Don't forget about the food, of course. How can I forget about the food? Paul, I wanted to ask you a question.
Well, Barry, before you do, let me just say we love you. So thanks so much for sharing this with us today. But more importantly, what you did for the college, what you meant to Pitzer College. You are iconic, and you were and are transformational. So it's remarkable what you have what you've given to the place.
Oh,
So,
that's sweet.
and to all of us. I mean, as
Oh.
humans, as individual souls, you know, your
That's very-
gifts are just incredible. So thank you.
That's very sweet. I've tried to continue a kind of spirit that I got from the college now in this nonprofit that I run with a colleague called the Oregon Institute for Creative Research -E4, which is the 4 E's are for aesthetics with a ligature, ecology, education, and the environment. So, and one of the things we're doing right now is, and I'd love for all to look at the website and get on, if you get on the mailing list, because right now we're trying to save the northern spotted owl in the Elliott State Forest here, which will go to extinction, mainly because of Donald Trump and his last minute moves to take 3.5 million acres of land which has been dedicated to that owl off the list. So it'll be clear cut and the animal will be gone. So we're both trying to save the Elliott Forest and the northern spotted owl at the same time, and could use people's help. We have great posters. We also have a pandemic poster from with a wonderful, great line from Jane Goodall. And if you haven't read her recently or looked at what she has said about what we're doing to animal habitat and what we're doing to the environment to create plagues, take a look at it, because she is I still think an extraordinary person, and what she has to say is crucial for us. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine talking about anything that I do these days without talking about and if you haven't read it, the UN backed report that was done April of a couple of years ago about how much time we have left. And Paul, you know this better than I, so I don't want to step in your territory, but it is uppermost, foremost in my head.
As it needs to be in all of ours.
Yeah, and so it's important here too. Okay, I was told that I have to stop at let people go to the other thing, to another spot. So I would love to keep this going in a certain way. So if you look at the website and could get on it, I'll write
Barry,
back to you. Yeah,
can
where are
you,
you?
I'm here.
Oh.
Can you put the link in the chat? Are you able to, or
Bernie,
should I?
Somebody
It sounds
just
like a
already
mystery.
did.
I put the link in the
Somebody
chat.
just did.
I have no
Thank you,
idea what-
Susan. Okay, there is the
Oh,
link
link in the
right
chat.
there. Thank you.
Okay.
Barry, everyone can see the link and take it for what you're doing right now. So I have visited the site several times. So thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barry.
Love you guys. And let's try to
Okay.
connect again. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Marka.